Hey there, my sleepy friends. I hope the night has been gentle with you so far, and that your body is finally starting to soften and rest. Tonight, I want to tell you a quiet story about something you carry with you every day, but rarely notice: your limbs and how they slowly came to shape the way the human body moves, balances, and rests in the world. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe, leave a like, and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, let your shoulders drop, find a comfortable spot, and let's begin. You carry something older than your name. Before there were cities or fires or words spoken in the dark, there were limbs. Quiet extensions of a body learning to move through the world. What you lift, what carries you forward, and what steadies you when you pause. All of it comes from a history so long it has no edges. Long before anything resembled what you would recognize as an arm or a leg, there was only water and the slow drift of bodies through it. Limbs began not as tools or structures built for purpose, but as accidents of shape. Small fins, paddles of cartilage and muscle that moved almost imperceptibly against currents. These early extensions had no awareness of what they would become. They simply existed, responding to pressure, to temperature, and to the faint pull of survival in an environment that asked only one thing: keep moving, or sink. The water held everything. It supported weight without effort and allowed motion without the burden of mass pressing down. A body could twist, glide, or hover in place with only the slightest flick of a tail, or the gentle sweep of something almost like a limb. There was no ground to meet, no surface to push against. The early ancestors of your arms and legs were shaped by this weightlessness, by the freedom of 3 dimensions, by a world that asked nothing of strength or endurance, but only the ability to adjust, to turn, to drift a little closer to food or away from danger. Then the water began to recede in some places. Not everywhere, and not quickly. But in shallow edges where rivers met shores, where tides pulled back twice each day, there appeared something new: the boundary between floating and falling. Bodies that had known only the suspension of water found themselves pressed against mud, against sand, against the terrible weight of their own mass. The fins that had moved so easily through open water now scraped against solid ground. They bent in ways they had never bent before. Some broke, some wore down, but some, over spans of time too long to imagine clearly, began to change. The bones inside these early limbs were small and numerous, like pebbles strung together. They flexed and shifted, allowing the body to push and drag itself a few lengths forward when the water grew too shallow to swim. This was not walking. It was barely any movement at all. But it was enough. Enough to reach deeper water again. Enough to survive when the tide left a body stranded in the heat and the open air. You inherit from this. The small bones in your wrists, your ankles, and your fingers and toes. They are the descendants of that early flexibility that need to bend and adjust against a surface that would not yield. Your limbs remember mud, even if you have never touched it. They remember the first terrible weight of a body unsupported by water, the first clumsy press of bone against earth. The air was different. It moved around a body instead of through it. It dried skin that had always been wet. It required breath in a new way, a pulling inward and pushing outward that had to happen again and again without pause. And the limbs, still learning what they were, had to adjust to this too. They had to hold a body upright long enough to breathe. They had to support weight not for a moment, but for long stretches of time, hours, and then days, and then entire lives spent mostly out of water, only returning to it for relief or safety, or the old familiar suspension. The shoulders and hips began to shift. The joints that had once allowed only a sweeping motion, a paddling through water, started to rotate in new directions. They learned to bear weight from above, instead of moving against resistance from all sides. The muscles that had powered a tail through open ocean now anchored themselves differently, pulling and holding rather than simply pushing. This was not a decision. It was not planned. It happened because the bodies that could manage this new way of being survived, and those that could not did not. Your arms and legs carry this transition still. When you reach overhead, when you rotate your shoulder to look behind you, and when your hip allows you to step sideways or backward, or to kneel down close to the ground, you are using joints that were redesigned, slowly and without intention, for a world where weight mattered and where the pull of gravity never stopped. The early limbs were thick and short. They spread outward from the body like the legs of a lizard, keeping the torso low to the ground. This was stability. This was a way to move without toppling over, to keep the center of mass close to the surface that supported it. There was no grace in this movement, no efficiency. It was effortful and slow, but it worked. It allowed bodies to cross dry land, to find new water, and to escape the crowding and competition of the old places. For millions of years, this was enough. Limbs stayed short, stayed wide, and stayed close to the ground. They carried bodies that were still more comfortable in water than out of it, that returned to rivers and swamps and shallow seas whenever they could. The limbs did not change quickly because there was no need. The world moved slowly. Seasons passed. Generations lived and died. And the shape of a limb, the angle of a joint, and the length of a bone, all of this stayed mostly the same, shifting only in tiny increments, in changes so small that no single lifetime would ever notice. But the ground itself was changing. Forests grew taller, grasslands spread, deserts formed where there had been water. And the bodies that moved across these surfaces began to find that the old way of moving, the low and sprawling way, was not enough anymore. Distance mattered now. Endurance mattered. The ability to move for hours without stopping, to cover ground faster than the shift of seasons, and to go where food was, instead of waiting for food to come close. And so, the limbs began to lengthen. Not everywhere, not in every lineage, but in some, in the ancestors of creatures that would one day stand upright. The bones stretched, and the joints moved closer underneath the body, instead of splayed out to the sides. The center of mass lifted. The body rose up from the ground, and the limbs, for the first time, began to look like pillars instead of oars. This was the beginning of what you carry now. The bones in your legs, long and straight and strong, come from this slow lifting, this gradual rise from the mud and the sprawl. Your arms, though shorter, still carry the memory of when they too bore weight, when they helped push and pull a body forward before the legs learned to do all the carrying on their own. You come from water, but you were shaped by land. Your limbs are the record of that transition, the evidence of a body that learned to hold itself upright in a world that offered no help, no suspension, no relief from the constant press of its own weight. Standing still is harder than it seems. Not the standing you do now, automatic and thoughtless, but the first standing. The earliest moments when a body lifted itself fully upright and discovered that staying that way required a kind of attention no ancestor had ever needed before. The limbs that had learned to push against the ground now had to learn to hold, to balance, and to distribute weight across joints that were never designed for this particular task. The feet came first, though they were not yet feet as you know them. They were flat and wide, with toes that spread like fingers, gripping the surface beneath them. The ankles were thick and strong, built to absorb the shock of a body that now fell with each step, landing its full mass onto a small surface over and over again. Walking upright was not smooth. It was controlled falling, a series of catches and recoveries, and a constant negotiation between momentum and balance. The knees learned to lock. This was essential. Without it, standing required every muscle to work constantly, holding the leg straight through pure effort. But when the knee learned to straighten fully, to rest bone on bone in a way that required no muscular effort at all, standing became something a body could do for hours. You can feel this now if you pay attention. The way your knees settle when you stand in one place, the way they hold you without tiring, without thought. This is not a small thing. This is the inheritance of bodies that needed to stand and watch, to stand and wait, to stand through long stretches of time when movement was not needed, but presence was. The hips widened. They had to. As the spine lengthened and the torso rose, the pelvis became the foundation for everything above it. It carried the weight of organs, of ribs, of a head that was growing heavier. As the brain inside it expanded, the hip joints themselves deepened, becoming sockets that held the thigh bone in place with a firmness that earlier joints had never required. This was stability, but it came with a cost. The hips lost some of their flexibility and some of their range of motion. They became anchors instead of pivots. Your lower back carries the memory of this change. The curve in your spine, the small hollow just above your hips, exists because the body had to balance a vertical stack of bones in a way that kept the center of mass stable. As without this curve, you would tip forward. You would have to lean back constantly to keep from falling. The curve is not a flaw. It is a solution worked out over so many generations that it feels now like it was always meant to be this way. But standing still was only part of what the limbs had to learn. They also had to learn to catch a body in motion, to stop it without collapsing, to absorb force and redirect it. When you walk, each step sends a shock up through your heel, through your ankle, your knee, and your hip. The bones flex slightly. The joints compress and release. The muscles fire in sequence, tightening and loosening in a rhythm so fast and so precise that you never notice it unless something goes wrong. This rhythm was not always there. Early walkers moved stiffly, with joints that did not absorb shock well, with muscles that had not yet learned the timing. Each step was jarring. Each landing was a small impact that rattled up through the skeleton. But over time, the body learned to soften the landing, to bend the knee just enough to let the arch of the foot collapse and spring back, and to use the ankle as a hinge that gave a little with each step. Your feet are miracles of small adjustments. The bones inside them are numerous and tightly packed, connected by ligaments that stretch and hold, that allow just enough movement to adapt to uneven ground, but not so much that the foot becomes unstable. When you step on a stone, or a root, or a slope, your foot adjusts without your conscious instruction. It shifts weight, redistributes pressure, and finds balance in a fraction of a second. This is learned behavior, inherited across so many generations that it feels instinctive now, but it was not always so easy. The arms, no longer needed for walking, began to learn a different kind of weight-bearing. They became tools for lifting, for carrying, for holding things close to the body, or for pushing them away. The shoulders rotated in ways the hips could not, allowing the arms to reach in nearly every direction. This freedom came from the fact that the arms no longer supported the body's full weight. They were released from the burden of locomotion and given over to manipulation, to the careful work of shaping and holding and moving the world in smaller, more deliberate ways. But even the arms had to learn strength. Not the strength of motion, but the strength of stillness. Holding something heavy requires sustained effort, a kind of endurance that is different from walking or running. The muscles of the arms and shoulders learned to fire continuously, to hold tension without shaking, and to bear weight for minutes or hours when necessary. You feel this when you carry something awkward or heavy for too long, when your shoulders begin to ache, not from movement, but from the simple act of holding. The spine learned to compress and release with each breath. This is something you do constantly, without noticing. The slight rise and fall of your ribcage, the gentle flex of the vertebrae as air moves in and out. But this flexion also helps distribute weight. It allows the spine to act as a spring, absorbing some of the shock from walking, from standing, and from the constant press of gravity. The discs between each vertebra are soft and spongy, compressing when weight is applied and expanding again when the pressure is released. They wear down over time, becoming thinner and less flexible. But for most of a lifetime, they do their work quietly, allowing the spine to bend and twist and hold without breaking. The body learned to rest while standing, not sleep, but a kind of low alertness, a way of being present without expending more energy than necessary. Soldiers learn this. People who work on their feet for hours learn this. The ability to stand without exhaustion, to let the bones do most of the work while the muscles remain only lightly engaged. This is not laziness. This is efficiency. This is the body using the structure it has built over millions of years to hold itself upright with the least possible effort. And yet, even standing still is never truly still. Your body sways constantly, making tiny adjustments to keep your center of mass over your feet. If you stand in one place long enough, you will notice this: the slight shift of weight from one foot to the other, the small movements of your ankles and knees, and the way your hips adjust without your instruction. This is balance, but it is active balance, a constant conversation between your inner ear and your muscles, between your eyes and your feet, and between the pull of gravity and the body's refusal to fall. You inherit all of this. The ability to stand, to bear weight, to hold yourself upright without thinking about it. This is not simple. This is the result of slow changes across deep time, changes that reshaped bones and joints and muscles and nerves until they could do something no earlier body had ever done. You stand because your limbs learned, generation after generation, how to hold the weight of being human. The hand is not one thing, but many. It is 5 fingers and a thumb, 27 bones, 34 muscles, and an uncountable number of nerve endings, all working together in ways so coordinated that you rarely notice the complexity. But it was not always this way. The hand began as something far simpler: a paddle, a fin, a broad surface used for pushing through water. Over time, as bodies moved onto land, that paddle divided, separated into digits that could spread and grip and hold. The earliest fingers were clumsy. They could grasp, but only in a crude way, wrapping around a branch or a piece of food with all 5 digits at once. There was no precision, no ability to isolate one finger from the others. But even this rough grip was useful. It allowed bodies to climb, to pull themselves up into trees, and to hold onto surfaces that would otherwise be out of reach. The fingers lengthened, the bones inside them became more distinct, and slowly the hand began to develop the ability to curl and release in different ways. The thumb changed everything. Not immediately, but gradually, as the joint at its base began to rotate in a way the other fingers could not. This rotation allowed the thumb to move across the palm, to touch the tips of the other fingers, and to hold something small between the thumb and forefinger in a pinch grip. This is called opposition, and it is the foundation of almost everything the human hand can do. Without it, you could not write, could not thread a needle, and could not hold a tool with the precision needed to shape wood or stone or clay. But opposition required patience. The muscles that control the thumb are small and slow to develop. They had to learn not just strength, but control, the ability to apply just enough pressure and no more. Too much force and a small object would be crushed or dropped. Too little and it would slip away. The hand had to learn the difference between gripping and holding, between grabbing and cradling, and between force and care. The fingertips became sensitive. The skin there thickened into ridges, patterns unique to each individual, that increased friction and made it easier to hold on to smooth surfaces. Beneath that skin, nerve endings multiplied and became so densely packed that the fingertips could detect differences in texture that the eye could not see. You can feel this now if you run your fingers over a surface. The way they read roughness and smoothness, the way they sense temperature and moisture, and the way they tell you about the world through touch alone. The hand learned to work for hours without tiring, not through strength, but through endurance and the ability to shift effort between different muscles, different grips, and different angles of pressure. When you hold something lightly, like a pen or a cup, the small muscles in your hand and forearm do most of the work. When you grip something tightly, the larger muscles in your forearm and upper arm engage. The hand knows how to distribute this effort, how to switch between different kinds of holding without your conscious instruction. Repetition shaped the hand as much as evolution did. The same motion performed thousands of times, scraping a hide, sharpening a stone, weaving fibers together, created patterns of muscle memory that did not need thought to execute. The hand learned these motions so deeply that they became automatic, fluid, and almost invisible. You see this in anyone who's worked with their hands for years. The potter shaping clay, the woodworker planing a board, and the cook chopping vegetables. The hands move with a certainty that looks effortless, but is really the result of countless hours of practice, of the body learning through repetition what works and what does not. The wrist allowed this. Without the wrist's ability to rotate, to flex up and down and side to side, the hand would be far less useful. The wrist is not flashy. It does not have the complexity of the fingers or the precision of the thumb. But it positions the hand, angles it, and holds it steady, or allows it to move in smooth arcs. When you write, your wrist moves the pen across the page. When you turn a doorknob, your wrist provides the rotation. When you lift something heavy, your wrist locks to keep the hand in line with the forearm, preventing injury. The hand also learned to be gentle. This is not a small thing. Strength is useful, but too much strength can be destructive. The hand had to learn to touch without harming, to hold without crushing, and to explore without breaking. This gentleness is controlled strength, the ability to apply force precisely and to stop applying it the moment it is no longer needed. You use this every day without thinking about it. When you pet an animal, when you button a shirt, when you pick up something fragile. But the hand is also capable of great force when necessary. The grip strength of the human hand is considerable, enough to hang from a branch for minutes, to hold onto a tool while striking or cutting, and to carry heavy objects without dropping them. This strength comes not just from the hand itself, but from the entire arm. The forearm muscles that control the fingers, the upper arm muscles that stabilize the elbow and shoulder, and the core muscles that support the whole structure. The hand is the end point, but it is supported by the entire body working together. The hand remembers what it has done, not consciously, but in the calluses that form where skin meets friction repeatedly, in the way certain grips feel natural because they have been performed so many times before, and in the slight ache that appears after hours of work. The body keeps track of this, adjusting the strength of tendons and ligaments, thickening skin where it is needed, and building muscle where effort is regularly applied. The hand you have now is shaped by what you have asked it to do over the course of your life. And yet, despite all this complexity, the hand is capable of stillness. It can rest completely, fingers loose and relaxed, muscles disengaged. This rest is as important as movement. It allows the hand to recover, to release the tension that builds during work, and to prepare for the next task. You see this in sleep, when the hands lie open and loose, or in moments of calm when they rest in your lap without purpose or intention. The hand does not act alone. It is always guided by the eye, by the brain's map of space and distance, and by the sense of where the body is in relation to the world. When you reach for something, your hand already knows where it is going before it gets there. It opens to the right width, adjusts its angle, and prepares to grip. This coordination is so seamless that you only notice it when it fails, when you misjudge a distance or fumble an object. But most of the time, the hand and the eye and the brain work together so smoothly that the motion feels like one continuous thought. The human hand is not the strongest or the fastest, but it is perhaps the most adaptable. It can perform an enormous range of tasks with the same basic structure, switching from power grip to precision grip, from holding to striking, and from exploring to creating. This adaptability is the result of deep time, of countless small adjustments and refinements, of a structure that learned to do many things well rather than one thing perfectly. You carry this inheritance in every gesture, every touch, every moment, when your hand reaches out and engages with the world. The hand is patient because it had to be, because the tasks that shaped it required not just strength, but care, not just speed, but precision. It learned to wait, to work, and to hold steady when everything else was uncertain. The legs carry you forward, but they do so in a way that is unlike anything else in the body. They are not tools like the hands. They are not sensors like the eyes or ears. They are engines built for one primary task, moving the body across distance. And they do this with a kind of efficiency that is easy to overlook because it happens so automatically, so constantly, that you rarely stop to consider how remarkable it is. Walking is a controlled fall. Each step begins with a slight loss of balance as you shift your weight forward and lift one foot off the ground. For a fraction of a second, you are supported by only one leg, and the body tips forward, pulled by gravity. Then the lifted foot swings forward and lands, catching your weight before you fall. The other leg lifts, and the process repeats. This happens so smoothly that it feels like gliding, but it is really a series of tiny falls and catches, one after another, for as long as you keep moving. The legs learned to do this without wasting energy. Early walkers were inefficient, their muscles working constantly to stabilize and propel the body. But over time, the legs developed a rhythm, a pendulum-like swing that uses momentum instead of muscular effort. The leg swings forward naturally, pulled by gravity and the motion of the body, and the muscles only need to intervene slightly to guide it, to adjust the speed and placement of the step. Most of the work is done by the initial push-off, by the calf muscles and the Achilles tendon acting like a spring that stores energy and releases it with each step. The Achilles tendon is one of the strongest structures in the body, and it is essential to walking. It connects the calf muscle to the heel bone, and it stretches and contracts with each step, absorbing force when the foot lands and releasing it when the foot pushes off. This elastic recoil saves energy, allowing you to walk for miles without exhausting the leg muscles. You do not notice it working unless it is injured, but it is active with every step you take, every stair you climb, and every time you rise up onto your toes. The hips rotate as you walk, swinging slightly forward with each step. This rotation helps lengthen your stride, allowing you to cover more ground without working harder. It also helps keep your balance, shifting your center of mass smoothly from side to side as your weight transfers from one leg to the other. This rotation is subtle, almost imperceptible, but without it walking would be stiff and awkward, requiring far more effort. The legs are built for endurance, not speed. Humans are not fast runners compared to most other animals, but they are extraordinarily good at covering long distances at a steady pace. This ability comes from the way the legs distribute effort, from the way they use tendons and ligaments to absorb and release energy, and from the way they can maintain a rhythm for hours without stopping. Early humans walked. They walked to find food, to escape danger, and to follow herds of animals across vast landscapes. They walked until the landscape itself became familiar, until the legs knew every kind of terrain and could adjust to it without thought. The muscles in the legs are layered, each group designed for a different task. The large muscles of the thigh power the leg forward, providing the force needed to push off the ground. The smaller muscles around the knee and ankle fine-tune the movement, adjusting balance and direction. The deep muscles close to the bone provide stability, holding the joints in place while the outer muscles do the work of motion. All of these muscles work together, firing in sequence, each one doing its part in a coordination so complex that it would be impossible to perform consciously. The legs also learned to carry weight, not just the weight of the body, but additional weight, tools, food, children, and materials. The ability to walk while carrying something is uniquely human in its efficiency. The legs adjust to the added mass, the stride shortens slightly, the muscles engage a little more forcefully, but the basic rhythm remains the same. You can walk for hours with a heavy pack on your back, and the legs will keep moving, keep supporting, and keep carrying you forward. But walking is not the only thing the legs learned to do. They also learned to run, to jump, to climb, to squat down low, and to rise back up. Each of these movements requires different coordination, different timing, and different kinds of strength. Running is faster but less efficient, requiring more muscular effort and more force with each impact. Jumping requires explosive power, the ability to generate force quickly enough to lift the entire body off the ground. Climbing uses the legs in combination with the arms, pushing the body upward against gravity. Squatting requires the legs to support the body's weight while folded, the joints bearing pressure at angles that walking never demands. The knees absorb enormous force. Every time you step down from a height, every time you jump and land, the knees compress and absorb the shock, preventing it from traveling up into the hips and spine. The cartilage inside the knee joint acts as a cushion, and the ligaments hold the bones together even under extreme pressure. Over time, this cartilage wears down and becomes thinner and less effective. But for most of a lifetime, the knees do their work quietly, bearing weight and force without complaint. The legs remember the places they have walked, not in any conscious way, but in the way they adjust to familiar terrain, the way they anticipate slopes and stairs, and the way they know how to move through a space you have crossed many times before. This is muscle memory, a kind of physical knowledge that does not require thought. Your legs know how to walk through your home in the dark, how to navigate a route you take every day, and how to adjust to the rhythm of the ground beneath you. And yet, the legs are also capable of stillness. Standing in one place, holding the body upright without moving, is work. But it is work the legs have learned to do with minimal effort. The muscles engage just enough to maintain balance, and the bones lock into place, supporting the weight without strain. You can stand for a long time if you need to, shifting your weight occasionally to prevent fatigue, but mostly letting the structure of the legs do the work. The legs do not tire easily, but they do tire. After hours of walking or standing, the muscles begin to ache, the joints become stiff, and the feet begin to hurt. This is the body telling you to rest, to sit or lie down, to take the weight off the legs and let them recover. Rest is essential. Without it, the legs cannot repair the small damage that accumulates with use, cannot rebuild the muscle fibers that have been strained, and cannot restore the cushioning in the joints. At night, the legs relax completely. The muscles release their tension, the joints decompress, and the legs lie still, heavy and loose. This is when recovery happens, when the body repairs itself, when the legs prepare for the next day's work. You do not notice this unless you wake suddenly and feel the weight of your legs, the way they rest against the mattress, solid and unmoving. The legs carry you through life, one step at a time. They do not hurry unless you ask them to. They do not falter unless something is wrong. They simply move, day after day, carrying the weight of your body across whatever distance you ask of them. This is endurance, not as a feat of willpower, but as a quiet capability built into the structure itself. The legs were made for this, shaped over deep time to do one thing exceptionally well: to keep moving, to keep carrying, to keep going forward. Movement is not thought. It is something deeper, something that happens before thought, faster than thought, in a part of the body that does not use language or logic, but works through rhythm and repetition, and a kind of intelligence that has no voice. When you reach for a cup, your hand does not wait for instructions. It moves. It knows the distance, the weight, and the shape of what it will grasp before it gets there. This is not magic. This is coordination, the body's way of knowing itself in space and time. The brain holds a map of the body, but it is not a map drawn with lines and labels. It is a map of sensation and possibility, of what the body can do and where it is at any given moment. This map is constantly updated and constantly revised as the body moves through the world. When you lift your arm, the map shifts. When you take a step, it adjusts. When you close your eyes, the map does not disappear. It continues, built from memory, and the sense of where your limbs are, even when you cannot see them. This sense is called proprioception, though the name is less important than what it does. Proprioception is the body's awareness of itself, the way your muscles and joints send constant signals to the brain about their position, their tension, and their angle. You do not have to look at your hand to know where it is. You do not have to think about your feet to know they are touching the ground. The body knows these things automatically, and it uses this knowledge to move without hesitation. Coordination is learned, but not in the way you learn facts or skills. It is learned through doing, through repetition, and through the body discovering what works and what does not. A child learning to walk does not understand balance or momentum, or the mechanics of how legs move. The child simply tries, falls, tries again, and slowly the body learns. The muscles learn how much force to apply. The joints learn how to position themselves. The brain learns to predict what will happen when the body shifts weight or swings a leg forward. This learning never stops. Even as an adult, the body is constantly adjusting, refining, and improving its coordination. When you walk on a new surface, your legs adapt within a few steps. When you pick up an object of unexpected weight, your arms adjust almost instantly. The body is always learning, always updating its map, and always finding new ways to move more efficiently. Rhythm is essential to coordination. Walking has a rhythm. Breathing has a rhythm. The heart beats in rhythm. These rhythms overlap and influence each other, creating a kind of internal music that the body follows without conscious effort. When you walk, your breath adjusts to match your pace. When you run, your heart speeds up, your breath quickens, and your legs move faster, all in sync. This synchronization is not forced. It emerges naturally from the body's need to work as a whole, rather than as separate parts. The arms and legs learned to work together, though they do different things. When you walk, Your arms swing in opposition to your legs, the left arm forward when the right leg steps, and the right arm forward when the left leg steps. This counterbalance helps keep the body stable and prevents it from twisting with each step. You do not have to think about swinging your arms when you walk. They move on their own, following the rhythm set by the legs, contributing to the overall balance and efficiency of the motion. But the arms and legs can also move independently when needed. You can walk while carrying something, holding your arms still or using them to hold an object steady. You can stand still while your hands work, shaping or building or writing. This independence is another kind of coordination, the ability to isolate one movement from another, to keep one part of the body active while another part rests or performs a different task. The brain coordinates all of this, but it does so mostly without conscious thought. The conscious mind can intervene and can choose to move in a particular way, but most movement happens below that level, handled by older parts of the brain that do not need language or deliberation. These parts of the brain are fast. They react in milliseconds, adjust in balance, correcting errors, and preventing falls before you even realize there was a problem. This speed comes from practice. The more a movement is repeated, the more automatic it becomes, and the less the conscious mind needs to be involved. This is why walking feels effortless, why you can talk or think or look around while you walk, without losing your balance or forgetting how to move. The coordination required is complex, but it has been practiced so many times that it no longer requires attention. The body also learns to anticipate. When you reach for something, your hand begins to open before it arrives. When you step onto a stair, your leg begins to lift before your foot touches the surface. This anticipation is based on experience, on the body's accumulated knowledge of how the world works and how movement unfolds over time. The brain predicts what will happen next and prepares the body to respond, shaving fractions of a second off every action. But coordination can fail. It fails when the body is tired, when the signals from muscles and joints become less clear, and when the brain's predictions are wrong. You stumble, you drop something, and you misjudge a distance. Those failures are reminders that coordination is not automatic in the sense of being guaranteed. It is automatic in the sense of being learned so deeply that it feels effortless, but it still depends on the body being awake, alert, and functioning well. The inner ear plays a role in this. Inside the inner ear are small structures filled with fluid and tiny crystals that move when the head moves. These structures detect acceleration, rotation, and the tilt of the head. They send signals to the brain about which way is up, whether the body is moving or still, and whether it is falling. This information combines with the signals from the eyes and from the muscles and joints to create a complete sense of balance and orientation. When these systems conflict, the body becomes confused. This is what happens when you spin in circles and then stop. The fluid in your inner ear is still moving, telling your brain you are still spinning, but your eyes and muscles say you are still. The brain does not know which signal to trust, and the result is dizziness, a temporary loss of coordination. But normally, these systems work together seamlessly, and you move through the world with confidence, knowing where you are and where your body is in relation to everything around you. Coordination is also social. When you hand something to another person, your hand and their hand have to arrive at the same place at the same time. When you walk with someone, you adjust your pace to match theirs without thinking about it. When you dance, you respond to another person's movements, your body coordinating not just with itself, but with theirs. This social coordination is learned too, through practice and observation, through the body's ability to read subtle cues and adjust in real time. The quiet intelligence of movement is this: the body knows more than the mind can articulate. It knows how to move through space, how to balance, and how to adjust to changing conditions. It knows this not through rules or instructions, but through lived experience, through millions of years of bodies learning to move and passing that learning down through the structure of bone and muscle and nerve. You inherit this intelligence. You use it every day without knowing it. And it works, quietly and constantly, keeping you upright, keeping you moving, and keeping you coordinated in a world that is always shifting beneath you. There are moments when the limbs are still, and yet they are not truly resting. They hold position. They maintain a posture. Even when you sit, when you lie down, or when you lean against something solid, the limbs are engaged in small ways, in adjustments and tensions that keep the body where it is, and that prevent collapse or discomfort. True rest, the kind where the limbs release all effort, is rarer than it seems. The body has preferred positions, places it returns to again and again. These are not conscious choices, but habits formed over years, over a lifetime. You cross your legs the same way every time you sit. You fold your arms in a particular pattern. You sleep on the same side, night after night. Your limbs arranged in a familiar configuration. These habits are comfortable because they are familiar, because the body has learned them so deeply that they require no thought, no adjustment. Sitting is not natural in the way standing or walking is natural. The body was not designed to sit for hours. The hips and lower back bear weight in a way they were not built for, compressed and held at angles that, over time, create stiffness and discomfort. And yet, sitting is what most people do for much of the day, and the body adapts. The muscles shorten, the joints stiffen, and the spine curves forward. This is not failure. This is the body responding to what is asked of it, even when what is asked is not ideal. The legs, when sitting, are almost idle. They bear no weight. They do little work. The muscles relax, the joints settle, and the legs rest in whatever position they are placed. But they do not rest completely. The muscles remain slightly engaged, enough to hold the position, enough to keep the legs from sliding or shifting without intention. This low-level tension is so constant that you do not notice it unless you pay attention, unless you deliberately try to relax the legs fully and discover how much effort was still being applied. The arms, when at rest, hang or fold. They are heavy, and without conscious effort, they would simply drop to the sides, pulled by gravity. But even when resting, the arms are usually held in some way, crossed or folded, or resting on a surface, and this holding requires a small amount of muscular effort. The shoulders bear the weight of the arms, and over time this can create tension, tightness, and an ache that builds so gradually you do not notice until it becomes pain. At night, the body finally releases. When you sleep, the muscles relax in a way they do not during the day. The limbs grow heavy and loose, and the body settles into the surface beneath it. This is when recovery happens, when the muscles repair themselves, when the joints decompress, and when the nervous system processes and organizes the day's experiences. Sleep is not just rest for the mind. It is essential rest for the limbs, for the body that has worked all day without stopping. But even in sleep, the limbs are not completely still. You shift position many times during the night, rolling from one side to the other, adjusting an arm or a leg, seeking comfort or relieving pressure. These movements happen mostly without waking, guided by the body's sense of what it needs, of where discomfort is building, and of when a position has been held too long. The body knows how to care for itself, even when the conscious mind is absent. Habit shapes the way the limbs age. The movements you repeat most often are the ones that stay easiest. The positions you hold most often are the ones the body defaults to. If you walk every day, walking remains easy. If you sit for years without stretching, standing becomes harder. The body adapts to what you ask of it, and it loses what you do not use. This is not punishment. This is efficiency. The body invests its resources in what it needs and lets go of what it does not. The hands, at rest, curl slightly inward. This is their natural position, the shape they take when all the muscles release. You can see this when you sleep, when your hands lie open but not flat, the fingers gently curved. This curve is built into the structure of the hand, into the tendons and ligaments that, when relaxed, pull the fingers inward just a little. It is a protective position, one that keeps the hand ready to grip if needed, even in sleep. The feet, at rest, point slightly outward. This too is natural, the result of the way the hip joint rotates when the leg is relaxed. When you lie down, your feet fall to the sides unless you consciously hold them straight. This outward rotation is comfortable because it requires no effort, no tension. The legs simply rest in the position gravity, and the structure of the joints pull them toward. Stretching is a kind of intentional rest, a way of releasing tension that has built up over hours or days. When you stretch, you are not strengthening the limbs, but reminding them of their full range of motion, of the positions they are capable of, but rarely use. Stretching feels good because it relieves the small accumulations of tightness, because it sends blood to muscles that has been held in one position too long, and because it resets the body's sense of what is comfortable. But stretching cannot undo all the effects of habit and use. The body changes over time, and some of those changes are permanent. The joints wear down, the muscles lose some of their elasticity, the tendons become less flexible. This is aging, and it is not a failure. It is the result of a body that has worked, that has moved, that has lived. The limbs carry the evidence of this work, and they continue to carry it, doing what they can with what they have. The limbs at ease are not dramatic. They do not call attention to themselves. They simply exist, heavy and warm, resting or holding, waiting for the next task or the next movement. This is most of what the limbs do. Wait, ready but not active, present but not demanding. They are there when you need them, and they withdraw when you do not, settling into stillness until the next time they are called upon. Rest is not the absence of work. It is the body's way of preparing for more work, of recovering from what has been done, and of maintaining itself so that it can continue. The limbs rest, not because they are weak, but because rest is part of what allows them to be strong, to endure, and to keep functioning day after day, year after year. They rest so that they can move again, so that they can carry you forward when you ask them to. You did not design your limbs. You did not choose the length of your legs, or the shape of your hands, or the way your joints move. These were given to you, inherited from a chain of ancestors so long that it disappears into time beyond counting. Every bone, every muscle, every tendon carries a history that is not your own, a history that began long before there were names or language or any notion of what it meant to be human. The limbs you have are not perfect. They ache, they tire, they fail in small ways, and sometimes in large ones. But they are also extraordinary, not because they are flawless, but because they work at all. Because they carry you through the world with a competence that is easy to overlook. You walk without thinking about how walking works. You reach without calculating distance or angle. Your hands hold and shape and touch, and all of this happens so smoothly that it seems simple. But it is not simple. It is the result of deep time, of bodies adapting and changing and learning across millions of years. The decisions that shaped your limbs were not made consciously. They were made by survival, by the slow accumulation of what worked, and the gradual disappearance of what did not. The bodies that could walk farther survived. The hands that could grip more precisely made better tools. The legs that could carry weight without breaking passed that strength down to the next generation. None of this was planned, and yet it resulted in something functional, something capable of remarkable things. You carry the memory of water in your limbs, the flexibility of your wrist, the structure of your fingers, the way your shoulder rotates. All of this comes from ancestors who moved through water long before they moved on land. The limbs remember that weightlessness, that freedom of motion in 3 dimensions. Even though you've never lived in water, even though your life is bound to the ground, you carry the memory of trees in your limbs, the ability of your hands to grip, the strength of your arms to pull, the way your shoulders can bear weight when you hang or climb. All of this comes from ancestors who lived in forests, who moved through branches, who needed to hold on or fall. You do not live in trees now, but the limbs remember, and they are still shaped by that need, by that old way of being. You carry the memory of open plains in your limbs, the endurance of your legs, the efficiency of your stride, the way your body can walk for hours without stopping. All of this comes from ancestors who followed herds across vast distances, who walked to find water or food or safety. The plains are still there, in the way your legs move, in the rhythm they fall into when you walk, and in the tirelessness they are capable of when asked. And you carry the memory of hands that made things, not just used things, but created them, shaped them, imagined something that did not exist, and then brought it into being through slow, patient work. Your hands are not just tools. They are the descendants of hands that held the first shaped stones, that built the first shelters, and that wove the first fibers into something useful. This capacity for making, for shaping the world, is built into the structure of your hands, into the way they can hold and manipulate and work with precision. The limbs do not know they carry this history. They simply do what they were shaped to do. They move, they hold, they carry, and they rest. They perform these tasks without reflection, without awareness, and without any sense of the long line of bodies that came before them. But the history is there. in the bones and joints and muscles, in the way everything fits together and works together, in the quiet competence of a body that has been refined across deep time. You are not separate from this history. You are part of it. Every time you walk, you are walking in a way that was learned over millions of years. Every time you reach for something, you are using a hand that was shaped by countless small adaptations. Every time you stand or sit or lie down, you are inhabiting a body that carries more knowledge than you could ever consciously hold. The limbs age. They slow down. They become stiffer, weaker, and less responsive. This is not failure. This is the natural arc of a body that has worked, that has moved, that has lived. The limbs do not last forever, but they last long enough. They carry you through childhood, through adulthood, and through old age if you are fortunate. They do not ask for thanks or recognition. They simply do their work, quietly and constantly, until they can no longer do it. And when you are still, when you lie down at night and feel the weight of your arms and legs resting against the mattress, when you notice the heaviness, the solidity, the simple fact of having a body, in that moment, you are feeling something very old. You are feeling the same weight that every ancestor felt, the same pull of gravity and the same need for rest. This is not poetic. This is physical. This is the body you inherited, doing what it has always done, what it was shaped to do across time so deep it has no edges. The limbs carry you through life without fanfare. They do not announce themselves unless something is wrong. They simply work day after day, supporting, moving, holding, and resting. They are not miraculous in the sense of being beyond understanding. They are miraculous in the sense of being exactly what they needed to be, shaped by time and use, and the slow pressure of survival into something that functions, that endures, that carries you forward. You live in a body you did not make, and yet it is yours. It responds to your intentions. It moves when you will it to move. It rests when you let it rest. This is the inheritance, not just the structure of bone and muscle, but the living experience of being in a body, of moving through the world, of existing in time and space with limbs that remember more than you know, that carry more history than you can imagine, that continue, quietly and without ceremony, to do the work they were shaped for across deep time. And now, as you settle, as the day releases its hold, the limbs rest. They grow heavy. They soften. They let go of the small tensions that accumulated through hours of use. The hands uncurl, the legs lengthen, the body sinks, held by the surface beneath it, and the limbs, for this moment, do nothing but exist. Warm, present, still. This is their other work, this resting, this quiet preparation for whatever comes next. And in this stillness, in this release, they continue to carry you, even as you drift toward sleep.